How's it going, everyone? We have a guest with us today. Our guest is Larry. How are you this afternoon?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. So, how long have you been practicing for?
Um, well, officially, I guess, or consciously practicing since 1991, so about 32 years. But
All
my
right.
grandfather, who was one of the prime influences in my life, my maternal grandfather, um, we spent a lot of time fishing, uh, hiking. Well, he was old at that time, but out in the woods doing this and that. So he taught me how to listen for the tree, or listen to the trees, and taught me animism. Although I didn't know it was animism at that time, he didn't have a label for it, but that everything has a spirit and a semblance of sentience, and has as much of a right to exist on Earth as we do.
Mhm.
So I guess unconsciously practicing probably for 50 years.
All right. That's awesome. I was raised by my grandfather, and he would take me fishing and camping and all of these things as well. And so I have the utmost respect for the older generations and their way of viewing things. What? So I imagine you still go fishing and hiking and stuff like that today.
Yes, I do. This summer was kind of blown for me. I had an injury in early June that caused me a pretty extensive shoulder surgery and a blown knee, which still is not healing. So I've been kind of regulated to parks and trails and easy stuff. So
Well, that's hopefully that will go away for you sometime soon, so you can get back to it. I can imagine casting with a bum shoulder can be kind of rough.
right, no fishing at all, but some
Mm.
hiking and what have you. My shoulder, I guess I'll be doing therapy for another 6 to 7 months. They said it was the worst one that this doctor had ever done. He said he put 7 screws in, which was a record for him, but
Wow.
add that to all the other screws and
Did you
sutures,
get did
broken
you get
bones,
into a
and
fight with the
surgery and all
grizzly
that.
bear on the trail or something?
No, actually, I did this in the kitchen. So
Oh wow.
I stepped in cooking oil or something, and away I went.
7 screws, that's a lot. So out of the places that you've been hiking so far, have you do you go out of state and stuff, or have you been out of state to go hiking and things like that?
Well, I go out of state because I live right on the Missouri River at
Okay.
a town called Council Bluffs, Iowa, which is a suburb of Omaha. So,
Okay.
um, I do a lot of Nebraska and Iowa. We go down to Missouri sometimes, different places, but I guess my main places are cemeteries, just right here in town.
Okay.
That's where I find my happy place, for lack of a better word.
I can see that. I like cemeteries a lot as well. They're very calm and peaceful and sort of reassuring about the cycles of life. And there's a certain stillness there. Is there a certain park that you've been to that you would say is your favorite, like a national park, or is there a certain cemetery that you would say is your favorite?
Well, I don't care for um, populated parks.
Sure.
Um, they have people that piss me off, which is why I like cemeteries. Nobody there pisses me off. So,
Right. Yeah.
um, my favorite park is a tiny little place not too far from here, about 60 miles, called Wabanzi. My wife and I like to rent a cabin called the Hideaway, which is stuck back in the woods, and
Mhm.
uh, no no amenities, of course, but it has a water pump outside, so solar shower and what have you. But we're completely isolated there. Otherwise, there's a couple places I go to. Well, I did will again, hopefully next year, that requires some hiking and a little bit of cliff climbing to get down to some river beaches that are nice that I like.
That sounds great. That sounds like something I'd be into. So I see you've got some tattoos here. One looks like it says "as above, so below." Is
As
that
above, so below. Yep.
all right? So are you into like hermeticism and things like that as well?
I'm not. I've studied, or I've not necessarily studied, but I've researched a bit of Hermeticism,
Mhm.
Qliphoth, Thelema, what have you. But I'm uh, pretty much free form with my spirituality. I take it as it comes, and I think my deities do the same thing. So,
Yeah, it seems like you have a very, like you mentioned animism earlier, and I think that's a great approach, just to be sort of free form and not structured to any particular paradigm or ideology. I think there's a lot of freedom and growth in that. So you just mentioned something and it escapes me now. Well, oh, you said your entities. So what are there any particular entities that you like to work with?
well, Lucifer,
Okay.
uh, the old Lucifer, not the biblical
Uh-huh.
version that doesn't really exist, except Christians can't read, so they think it does. Yeah, that's an aside. I have a particular animosity toward Christianity, but Lucifer, and because of Lucifer, Lilith almost
Mm,
is a necessary compatriot to Lucifer, and then Lucifuge, Rufacal, and
mhm.
Astaroth, and then I
Okay.
have several others that I don't necessarily work with on a daily basis, but I do work with when the need or the use arises.
Okay. Yeah, those are all entities I'm familiar with, and several of those are related to the Clipoth. So it sounds like you do have some experience in those matters. Is that something that you can talk about?
Well, I can talk about experience. I don't think I can talk about the clip off because I don't know enough.
Okay, that's okay. So whenever you think about like Lucifer and Lilith, is there a certain like ritual or ceremony that you do, or do you just sort of like meditate on them, or how does that work for you?
Um, in my mind, at least, one of the four, or sometimes all four, are always with me
Mm-hmm.
in
Sure,
some capacity. I can always feel a presence. I can feel a presence now.
certainly.
Um, I'd have to concentrate a bit to understand which one, although I believe it's probably Astaroth. She's the one that's with me the most. But
Okay.
when I'm in the car, I feel them. When I'm in the woods, I feel them just all the time, those four.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like a just a comfortable, uh, well, I won't say friendship necessarily because it's more, I guess, a comfortable mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah.
always there.
Yeah.
But I do have some types of minor ceremony, like, I'll burn incense
Mhm.
every day. On certain days, I'll leave offerings. It could be whiskey for Astaroth. Lucifer likes tea.
Mhm.
Blood, depending on what day it is, what I'm leaving an offering for. I'll burn specific incense or
Mhm.
scented candles or what have you, but it's not really a ceremony. So just I do it while I'm going about my stuff in my lair, as my wife likes to call my room up here.
And I see it. It looks like a poster or a painting. All I can see is a giant white wing. Is that a depiction of Lucifer by chance?
Wait and see what you're seeing there.
It's to the other side, over your other shoulder there.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'll just do a quick spin around and you can see. So this, I'm sitting at my work table.
What a room.
So I have I don't know, a
Wow.
skull with some various pictures and stuff I just framed, and uh
Amazing.
my romantic skulls. I yeah, sorry. Ah,
You all right?
my knee just popped out. So
Oh,
it's back. It's back.
okay,
My
good.
books, my stones, my
Wow.
other stuff, closet behind the robes, altar, table full of fossils and shells.
Wow.
Another romantic. I think it's romantic.
Yeah.
Just some little sayings that I liked and printed.
Hmm.
Lucifer is the way, the truth, and the light. So
Excellent.
it's the smallest room we have in the house, and it's the one my wife would let me have.
It's quite a room. I would love I'd love to have something. I've got a room myself, but it certainly doesn't have the amenities that that one does. And it looks like you've got like some fishing tackle boxes or something with some supplies in there too. I
Uh,
like that idea.
those are stone beads, crystal beads that I work with, and then also
Okay.
findings and trinkets, charms, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, it's an awesome room. I love all the pictures and everything. So are is that skull a poster or is that something that you painted yourself?
Oh God, I can't paint. No, it's just it's a tapestry. Check out Amazon. You can get them for $20.
It's beautiful. I like it very much. So are there any like specific influences that you have that sort of like led you into this certain path into like Lucifer and Lilith in particular, or
Well, my grandfather died in 1991. Now I grew up in the country.
Mhm.
We raised horses and what have you, and so I would ride a lot. And from the time I was able to do it by myself, I don't know, 12 or 13, I think maybe my parents might have cut me loose. And I met this old couple of gentlemen
Mhm.
that lived on a gravel road, off a gravel road, off a gravel road. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with country type
Oh
stuff,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
on what they call a level 3 maintenance road, which means it hardly ever sees a plow or what
Sure.
have you. But I would ride by there, and they got to where they would bring out, when they saw me coming, they'd bring out an apple or a carrot or something for
Mhm.
my horse. And so I would stay and talk for a while, but we didn't really talk about much. I mean, they knew my grandfather, as it turned out, which is not surprising in a small town area. Everybody knows everybody. But
Right.
and then when he died, I actually, because I don't know, I didn't know why at the time, I guess, but I always liked going down and talking to him. One was an old Welshman, and he still had the lilt in his voice. The other guy was from Appalachian somewhere. I don't know, I want to say Tennessee, but I don't remember now. But and they've both been dead for 25 years. But and they kind of introduced me to witchcraft, as they know witchcraft at least. So
Sure.
our
Sure.
wife made me turn on the heat the other day, so hot up here. Um, they introduced me to witchcraft and gave me a word for my spirit to everything, animism. I didn't have a word for it until that time. So I guess they were major influences on the witchcraft part. And then I firmly believe that when you talk to someone in your dreams, if you dream about having a conversation with someone that has passed,
Mhm.
that you are actually talking to that person, or
Yes,
that person's spirit. I believe,
I think so too.
I believe in a three-part mortality, uh, body, spirit, and soul, and they're not the same thing at all. But anyway, so my grandfather, after he'd been dead maybe a year, and I still dream about him probably at least weekly, at least the dreams that I remember.
Right.
And he just came up. He wanted to introduce me to someone. He had another old guy with him that looked like your typical college professor with mussed up hair and scraggly beard, and
Uh-huh.
some ink stains on his jacket, stuff like that. And it turned out to be Lucifer. That's still how I see Lucifer today.
Wow.
Only now he's closer to my age, I guess, but I still see him as old and pedantic, and Lucifer is all about knowledge and wisdom and
Mhm.
learning anyway.
Right.
And then Lucifer kind of introduced me to others and just kind of went from there. I still meet new entities on occasion, and there's no way we can ever know them all. I mean, at
Right.
least not in one lifetime. So, and I guess I've been building on it ever since. And I suppose I don't know, I've never like called myself a witch, but I suppose, um, given my herbal collection and my crystal collection and all that, and I do try to do a spell of sorts here and there. So I guess, but I just consider myself a Luciferian,
Mhm.
um, animist,
Yeah.
Celtic pagan, I suppose.
I like it. I like it. I love how you mention how the sort of meetings go. It's like your grandpa introduced you to Lucifer, and then Lucifer introduced you to someone else, and then someone else. That's certainly how it has been for me too. I started with an entity, and then it was almost like getting into a magical order of the spirits. Like you had to meet one, and then he introduced you to the others. And that's certainly a very intriguing image that you painted of Lucifer, of the sort of, messy hair. I almost see like a mix between like Picasso and Albert Einstein or something. It's very interesting. I also like how you mentioned meeting deceased people in dreams and how that being an actual meeting, not just a representation. I've mentioned in an interview that I did before how my grandpa, a week that he passed away, I had a dream about him, and he showed me a specific like gesture that when I started using it in ceremonies, my spiritual path really started accelerating. So I don't know how to attribute that other than to the fact that, yeah, that it was really my grandpa, because he showed me something that I didn't consciously know. And that was so magical.
So you're talking about like a mudra or?
It was like a gesture where, so I'm not in the Golden Dawn, but there are certain practices that I do that belong to the Golden Dawn, and there's a certain sign that they do that is, it's very similar to the Heil symbol gesture, and I never really liked that. So I had this dream one time that I was in the living room, and this was right after my grandpa passed away. I was in the living room with all of my family, and there was a tornado that was coming. And my grandpa looked me dead in the eyes and said, "The sign of the Zelator." And he put his hand over his heart and then lifted it up like this. And I was just like, so then I did that as well. I'm getting chills right now. And I did it as well. And then the tornado got like blown away or whatever. So then I woke up from that dream and was like sweating profusely and shaking. So I like grabbed a pen and paper and wrote that down. And ever since then, when I'm doing workings related to that area, I still use that gesture of like, it's like pulling the heart out of my body and offering it up to like my higher self or something. But yeah, I spoke with someone else, and he said, "Oh, that's actually a symbol in Freemasonry." And my grandpa wasn't a Freemason, but he was in an order that was somewhat related to the Freemasons. So there's no way I could have known that
Right.
consciously. So I really feel like he shared that with me from beyond the grave.
I actually believe that that is probably true. Yes. I think if you wake up remembering the dream with your ancestors or your deceased
Yeah.
loved ones, that's because they actually were there. And,
Mhm.
I think we all know children maybe that are people that when they were children, someone died that they didn't really know, and they would have a dream that there was an old lady sitting on my bed smiling at me,
Uh-huh.
or there was a spider in my room, but this old man came in, or this person came in and chased it away, and we find out, well,
Exactly.
Uncle Jack died last night or the night before, or grandma, or great grandma, so I just think there's too much. I guess I would almost call it scientific evidence. It's only my own observations, but
Yeah. It's too much to call it a coincidence in my mind, that's for sure. So I noticed your shirt says "Ban the Bible." So is that something that you can talk about?
I can talk about it. I truly don't give a shit whether we ban the Bible or not, But I figure if they're going to ban books that talk about overt sexuality, ban books that talk about racism or anything that the Christians don't like, the mothers, what is it, Moms for Liberty or whatever, try to infiltrate school districts. They don't have children in to ban books. That we should start with the worst one of all. I mean, there's more genocide, there's more infanticide, there's more rape, more misogyny, slavery, just nothing. And then they'll say, well, that was the Old Testament. I said, well, then you obviously haven't read the New Testament. Oh, I know it word for word. Well, then you know the part where Jesus said, I have not come to replace the law, I've come to uphold the law. But you also know the part where he said, it is better for heaven and earth to pass away than for one letter of the law to not be upheld. You know those, right? So obviously he's talking about the Old Testament laws. I know the Bible back and forth, but I,
So
I grew up in a Christian cult, so
Wow. So the synchronicities in my life have just exponentiated over the last month. But just before this interview, my best friend texted me, Matthew 10:34. Don't imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a
But a
sword.
sword, right?
Just texted me that right before this interview. So that is hilarious.
Well, and I guess I'm antagonistic, drive my wife nuts, especially now that I only got one leg to run away, I guess. But and I'll have Christians come up to me and say, "How can you think about that? That's just awful." I said, well, "Do you want to ban other books?" She said, "Well, yeah, of course." Um, well, why wouldn't you ban this one? It's worse than anything you want to ban. She says, "Well, because this is what I want to teach my kids." Are you trying to say I don't have a right to teach my children anything I want? So exactly, you have every right to teach your children exactly what you want to teach them. So does every other parent there.
Proving my point.
Usually they'll catch themselves about halfway through it, like, oh, you know, but doesn't
Yeah.
change anything. But
No, it doesn't. And I think as soon as you start drawing lines on you can teach your children this, but not this, it starts getting a little bit dicey because everybody's going to have different views, right?
right, with my children who are all grown now and my grandchildren, I leave them open to ask questions. They know they're welcome to ask any type of questions they want, no matter how uncomfortable it might make me or them, and I will answer them truthfully. And now my oldest grandchildren are 16, twin girls,
Wow.
and they're asking a lot of religious questions. Of course, they on their own grew up not liking Christianity or any Abrahamic religion, so.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't do that. They did it
That's a
on their
win for
own.
grandpa, huh?
So I answer anything they want as honestly as I can, and then I tell them that they need to make their own decisions, do their own research. Don't just listen to me or anybody else, and come up with things on their own, because that's the only way you're ever going to know if anything's real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I was initially raised Catholic, and then my mom got remarried, and then I was more raised Christian, and that is literally what turned me to like speaking with Lucifer and entities like that, because the representation of what Christianity meant was just so. Now there are some spells and there are some things in the Bible that I do find some utility in, but for the most part, I think that it's outdated, and I think like most of the Abrahamic faiths, like you said, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, it's like they belong to an old era and they never got updated, but
Right.
people are still trying to beat it into people's heads. And yeah, it's interesting how often forced Christianity tends to swing that pendulum the other way.
Right. Well, I think things have gotten worse over the last few years, but due to a certain ex-president,
Mm.
um, that I don't think he made things worse. I think he just gave people some sort of tacit permission to be who they really are.
Huh.
But so I think we have seems to be a lot more fundamentalists, a lot more evangelicals out there that take the
Yeah.
Bible literally. Now, my church actually did. I grew up Church of Christ,
Mhm.
which
Okay.
actually is recognized as a cult now. But and then, of course, when I got into high school and started actually studying science and this and that, it's like this shit doesn't make any sense. But
Yeah.
um, where they actually are forcing people, it's like do it our way or don't do it at all. But I know a lot of Christians that don't believe the Bible is a literal thing. It's all parables. It's stories meant to prove a point, or just stories. Some I think maybe the Christians of 2,000 years ago might have read Revelation the way we would read Isaac Asimov, or
Ex-
something.
well
So
said. Absolutely. Yeah. I yeah, I don't know how people take a fundamentalist approach to the Bible. It makes no sense if you think about it fundamentally. And people argue, like for instance, when it says that God created the earth and or created the universe or whatever in 7 days, they're like, well, a day to God isn't the same as a day to us. And it's like, well, then why does it use the Hebrew word yom, which means a 24-hour period? Like,
right, and plus
yeah,
the day after Genesis is a day.
yeah,
Is in the way
exactly.
we mean a day. So unless they change the meaning, which I mean they could have, the Bible's so full of its own contradictions, especially Genesis. But yeah, no, that's just crazy. I don't believe any deities created anything, actually. Not created. I think maybe they tweak here and
Sure.
there, but I think they evolved right along with everything else on the earth. They evolved before us, and they evolved in a much more powerful, prescient way than we did. But
I
I
love that
think they
perspective.
evolved just like we did. So
Yeah, I love that perspective that existence just sort of came into being, and then perhaps these deities and these principalities sort of evolved along the way with it. I love that approach.
right, and I whether it's panspermia or abiogenesis, I don't know. I think panspermia is probably where I lean because I do believe in a Satan of sorts, but my Satan is more like the universe itself in a sentient way. So, like maybe Satan created or set things in motion. Like the Big
Right.
Bang, or maybe Satan set that in motion. And but I don't think uh, he, it, she, whatever it is, has any interest in us,
Hmm.
or anything else that there is puny as us, or including the deities on this one planet or in this one solar system. There's so much more to occupy. So,
That resonates with me as well. I see Satan as sort of like a universal adversary as opposed to like an individual like devil or something.
right.
There is certainly a force of adversity in the universe. I mean, if you don't agree with that, try to walk up a hill. It's going to be harder than walking down a hill. There is a sense of adversity that exists. So you mentioned that you have kids and grandkids. How open are you? You said that they can ask you whatever. So are you pretty open about your spirituality and your practices with them then?
I, I am now. Yeah, I've always been with my kids, I guess, to a point. My first wife was I don't know, Christian, or
Uh-huh.
so she claimed.
Uh-huh.
Um, and she didn't like it too much, so I just kind of kept it to myself.
Mhm.
My second wife just didn't believe in anything. Um, it didn't really care what I did as long as I didn't bother her with it. This wife is, I don't know what the hell she. I would just call her a general pagan,
Uh-huh.
maybe with Hindu, uh, with
Leaning.
Hindu esque properties. I don't know, but but she doesn't believe that any person can box
Right.
anything beyond that person
Hmm.
and label anything because one thing is this for you and something else for another person, so so she's accepting of everything,
Hmm.
or maybe I guess it's like a do what thou wilt, only harm no other,
Uh-huh.
to borrow a Wiccan phrase, which I'm not Wiccan at all, but because sometimes I think there's good reason for harm. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Especially in this day and age, the overall mindset seems to be growing more violent. So, you have to, well, we won't get into my philosophies. So, what are some recommended practices, perhaps, for other practitioners out there who might just be getting started?
whoa, recommended practices. Listen, but not necessarily with your ears. Listen with everything that you are. Feel um, everything that you need to know. You will know if you're open to learning it.
Love it.
Um, it takes practice. It really does. It's kind of a form of meditation itself, I suppose. I don't meditate in the traditional way, um, but that is a and the best place I listen, of course, is somewhere away from people. But I
Oh,
can do it right here in my house too if I need to. So
I think that's great advice. Listen and be open. And what you said about if you're meant to know, you will know. I've found that to be true as well. And I feel like we're not meant to know certain things at certain times in our life, and there's an old saying that it's something about it, the phrase escapes me now that I'm putting myself on the spot, but basically, if it comes easy, it's going to leave easy. It was something about what's written in sand will be washed away, something
right.
like that. Yeah. And what's the biggest difficulty about being a practitioner in your mind?
Um, well, I'm a pretty solitary person
Sure.
overall. I think I always have been, but sometimes finding other people in my area, which is
Uh,
pretty red, um, to practice with. I have friends that like to talk about it, but they don't necessarily want to practice it or what have you. So I think just finding people to connect with in person.
mhm.
And there are a few that I connect with in certain ways. I have a ordination, a minister ordination, so I can do. I don't do weddings or anything like that because there's always somebody that will say, "Well, if you're going to do a Satanist wedding, I'm not coming," or whatever. But I'll do crossing ceremonies and blessings and what have you. So there are some, but
That's
no
interesting.
one that I'm close to here.
I'm actually an ordained minister as well. I've never performed a wedding or anything, but I've blessings and things like that. It's pretty fun. It's a fun thing to do, and it's always a surprise when you've known somebody for a few years and they have no idea that you're ordained, and you get to like pull out the certificate or whatever and show them
Right.
that. That's always a surprise.
Yeah, I don't talk about it, I guess.
This is the first time I've mentioned it actually. I think my partner is the only other person who knows. Anyway.
It's like having big feet for me. I have big, I don't necessarily talk about them. So,
That's funny. I never thought I'd hear that comparison. So, what are some mistakes that you made earlier on in your magical career?
well, my mistakes for me aren't necessarily going to be mistakes for other people, but my mistakes was trying to be too ceremonial, too stuck in routine, trying to do everything the way I was taught, or they weren't really. My initial teachers weren't really into much routine. They were pretty open up,
Right.
freestyle too. But other people that I've met since then, that if you're going to do uh, a banishing, you have to do it this way. If
Mhm.
you're going to pray, you have to do it this way. And
Right.
so trying to do things in the prescribed manners, I guess, was my biggest mistake for
Mhm.
me. Now, other people I know do better with that.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. I know for myself, I started like way too like by the book and was couldn't figure out why it wasn't working for me. And it's like, well, you're not doing your own stuff. Like it's an art, and you have to sort of figure out what works for you. And I think a lot of people could benefit from that advice.
Right.
So how has magic changed over the years? Has there been like any major changes or anything that you've noticed over the last 32 or over the last 50 years?
That's one of my, I guess, biggest pet peeves actually is that if you go on Reddit or
Uh-huh.
TikTok or what have you, or there's actually a site called Witches and Pagans Amino, which is kind of like a Reddit thing.
Yeah.
And all of these younger people say you have to do this way, you have to do that way. This crystal won't work unless you cleanse it
Right.
in the moon, and this one has to be. It's like, what kind of bullshit is that? That you the boxes again, you're putting everything into its own little cage, and if something slips through the bars just a little bit, you say it's not going to work. That's not the way it is. Not for me. That's not the way it is. I shouldn't say it's not for everyone, but um, it should all be a freestyle, free form.
Mhm.
It should just be part of who you are.
Right. Yeah.
You are part. You are this. Like I'm Scots, Irish, and Norman French, right? So I'm also a witch, a pagan, a Luciferian. It's just who I am. I have gray hair. It's part of who I am.
Right.
So
Right. That's funny. You remind me a little bit of Billy Connolly. I'm not sure if you know who that is. I think he's a Scottish actor, but yeah, I had a feeling I have Welsh and Scottish heritage in my bloodline, and you remind me of one of my uncles a little bit. So I thought maybe you were perhaps from that region. So you've noticed like more gatekeeping
There,
and
yeah, I knew there was a term for it. Gatekeeping, yes.
yeah, unfortunately, I've noticed that as well. And it's funny that you mentioned Amino. I was actually kicked out of Amino,
Oh,
the
really?
Witches and Pagans group, for simply suggesting that perhaps Odin's name could be broken down into an understanding based on the individual meanings of the Futhark runes, like Odal meaning ancestry, and Dagaz meaning a breakthrough, and et cetera, et cetera. And they said, get that shit out of here. That doesn't belong here. And then I got banned from the group. I'm like, wow, imagine banning somebody for a suggestion.
Yeah,
So,
you can't have any kind of counterintuitive suggestions. You got to go right along with whatever anybody says.
yep. Yeah. That's, I
I,
mean, that's detrimental to the practice, I think.
oh, I definitely think so. Yeah, because otherwise, how are you going to grow? How are you going to learn if
Mhm.
you're doing everything in a prescribed way?
Absolutely. And what are some things to avoid other than trying to tell people how to practice?
Um, Being stuck in a rut, I think.
Mm.
It's hard to avoid being stuck in a rut. We all have times when we just don't want to. You don't want to trudge upstairs to light that incense, or you don't want to. It's rainy today. I don't want to go to the woods or what have you. So you let yourself become lackadaisical, and then one day leads to another, and then pretty soon you haven't done anything spiritual for a month. And so
Yeah,
I think it's important to stay connected to your
right,
spiritual, um, and you can't do it unless you're actually doing it.
right.
So
So stick through it through the ruts and the plateaus.
right, it's like,
Yeah.
if I don't follow sports, but I know people that follow sports teams kind of religiously, and the good fans will stick with their team even when their team is losing, right? So even when your team is losing, you still need to stick to it.
I agree. I agree. Oftentimes I find when I feel like I'm in a plateau or a rut, just going back to the basics and reevaluating the fundamentals of what I think and what I believe. A lot of times I'll be like, "Oh, that's interesting," or "Oh, I could change that." And then the next thing I know, I'm right back into it. Hmm. So, what are some, or I guess I should say, are there any like films or books or bands that you would recommend that would help express the idea of a magical life to people?
uh, I don't know about films necessarily. I like any kind of film like that. The Craft, I don't know if you've ever seen that. You're probably too young to remember that, but
I've seen it, yeah.
that's one of my favorites, actually. I used to watch the Charmed series. People make fun of me. Oh, you're watching a girly show. Okay, I don't
It
care.
is
But
what it
anyway,
is.
so I like all of that. I don't learn anything from it necessarily. I don't learn anything real. But in terms of bands, I don't know if you've heard of them. They're actually a doo-wop band called
Huh.
Twin Temple. It's a husband and wife.
I've not heard of them. I'm gonna write that down. Twin Temple.
Twin Temple, yeah. And yeah, not the kind of music I normally would listen to, but their songs, I like their lyrics. So I actually listen to them. I like Ghost a lot. If
Okay.
you're familiar,
The band Ghost. Yeah.
Typo Negative um,
Okay.
has a lot of. Uh, I don't know that I necessarily learned, but I certainly
It creates an atmosphere, doesn't it?
it does. Right, Concrete Blonde is good. Behemoth, someone I'm in a heavier
I like
mood,
Behemoth.
or Midnight Society, or anything like that. A Dark Funeral.
Okay. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
listen to,
I'm familiar with them as well.
and then of course there's always Ozzy and Black Sabbath were my
Sure.
favorites, and
The
never gonna
progenitors. Yeah.
right. So although Ozzy was Catholic, he still is Catholic. He never was anything like his songs, but still.
That's
So
funny.
there's a lot of stuff I find something in that draws me to it beyond just the music. So
Mhm.
books, I read a lot of stuff. I guess Stephanie Connolly is probably my go-to. I know a lot of people complain about her stuff too for whatever reason, but Michael W. Ford, I read his stuff. I don't necessarily get a lot out of it, I guess, but I read E.A. Coetting a couple times, and the only thing I got out of that was that he likes to hear himself or see himself in print. Watched a couple of his videos. I think he's kind of, I thought he got in a lot of trouble recently or something. But
Yeah, I think so.
um, I watch his ex-wife on YouTube. What was her name? Anima Nora. I don't know her real name. That's her website or her YouTube handle. But and there are quite a few YouTube channels that I go to. I just discovered this one when you approached me on Reddit a month or so ago. But
Yeah.
then I found a couple other channels from the interviews you've done. So just
Awesome.
whatever piques my interest at the time.
Very
I
cool.
don't I don't let anything be concrete for me. And of
Mhm.
course, I've read all the old Abrahamic stuff, Abramelin and Book of Enoch, and all of the old stuff. I've got them all actually right here, but I've
Mhm.
read all of that. But again, nothing is set in stone for me. What works or what was for this person or what is for this person may not be for me. So
Yeah. A lot of times I'll take one thing from here and one thing from there and put them together.
right, you create your own
Mhm.
practice.
So
That's how I think. I mean, that way it's real, it's you, it's yours.
mhm. Yeah. Were you ever into like Poke Runyon?
What, Poke Runyon?
Yeah, do not. So Poke Runyon was like a ceremonial magician. He still is a ceremonial magician, but he was really big in like the 70s and 80s. He like re-brought like the Solomonic magic system like back into public
Uh,
focus.
no, I've never heard of him. I'll have to check him
Okay.
out.
He's a pretty cool guy. He must be in his 80s now, but yeah, I thought I'd throw that name out there. I wasn't sure if you'd ever heard of him or not. And I'm trying to think if there was. You mentioned a lot of bands that I like. So you listen to like metal and alternative music primarily then?
Most of the time, yeah. Well,
Okay.
I wouldn't call Black Sabbath an Aussie metal. I know that they're labeled as such now, but yeah. So, but I do listen to a lot of metal.
Okay.
I have pretty eclectic taste. I might listen to Willie Nelson, or
I love Willie Nelson.
Merle Haggard too. So I like some of the old outlaw country, but
Yeah. Yeah, I like the older country, like Bocephus and like you said, Merle Haggard, like the
right.
old style country. I don't really get down too much with this new like pop country stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't like it.
A lot of it's mixing with rap nowadays, which I never thought I'd see the day that that happened. All right, and last question already. What are your plans for the immediate future as far as your practice goes, if you have any?
Uh, yeah, I don't really make plans as far as my practice goes. I let things kind of happen as they happen, and um, sometimes I something happens that's incredibly meaningful to my in my life, and
Mhm.
otherwise it's kind of just the drifting along, doing the same old. So my immediate plans are to have another beer and then eat dinner. Hopefully, my wife will have something made.
Sounds good.
Old
What kind of
fat.
beer do you like?
What's that?
What kind of beer do you like?
Oh, right now I'm drinking Irish Wexford. It's a cream ale.
Okay.
I like imports, craft brews. I like a lot of it. I also have a 170 bottle whiskey collection, so
Okay.
which right now I'm limited on because I'm 6'3" and about 260 pounds. My wife is 5 foot tall and 106 pounds, and so if I fall down, she can't get me back up. So I'm limited to one whiskey a day. So that's killing me. But no, I like a lot of beer. I don't care for the most of the mega or the well, not mega macro breweries. Bud Light and Miller and what have you. I don't think they have much flavor, but
Yeah, I agree
I
with you.
don't like anything with fruit in it. I like beer made by the old right Heizgebaut standards. They can only have barley or wheat, water, yeast, and hops.
Okay. You you mentioned that you have 170 whiskey. I thought you were gonna say you have 170 proof whiskey. I was gonna say that's
I
pretty
have
strong.
that. I
Oh, do
do.
you really?
Well, it's like 164 proof, right?
Wow.
It's hard to get whiskey to that proof, but yeah.
I
Then all
imagine.
whiskey comes out of the barrel at 130, 40 sometimes, at least 120. It's watered down to the proof that you buy it in the bottle.
Sure, sure.
So I like a lot of cask strength whiskeys that, they take it right from the barrel, put it in the bottle, and
Mhm.
gotta be careful with them. Just strong.
I imagine it is. And that's a very, to me, a very magical process, the brewing of alcohol. I mean, it's very alchemical. A lot of the monks were into beer back in the day when they were
Oh,
copying
right.
Bible verses. They had a flagon in one hand and a quill pen in the other.
Because they could make beer like the heavier, what we call stouts now, and
Yeah,
what's the other porters they
yeah,
would make because they could drink it during fasting.
exactly, and still get their carbs.
Right. So, but yeah, beer started out as a spiritual ceremonial drink in Mesopotamia 3,000 years ago. So, um, wasn't meant to be imbibed every day. So, but
Have you
it
ever
is.
tried brewing any of your own alcohol?
I tried. It's a lot of work. It's a
Is it?
lot of work. I mean, we have a few stores in Omaha that cater to home brewing or home cheese making or whatever. So my wife and I made like 5 gallons of beer. Um, Took us 2 days to make it. Then you got to let it sit for like a month and stare at it while you can't drink it.
That's no
And
fun.
then when we did drink it, it tasted like shit. So
Oh no, it didn't turn out very good.
no, it was bad. It was bad. So no, I'll let other people do the making and I'll just do the drinking.
Sounds like a good deal to me. Awesome. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to mention or anything you feel like we missed?
No, I think we covered everything. I have a
Awesome.
pretty narrow little world, I think, when it comes to my spirituality. So,
Well, I mean, it sounds pretty eclectic to me, and it sounds like you've sort of made it your own over time, and I really respect that.
well, thank you.
What's this other tattoo? Is it a broom?
I know it's a black.
It's
They're old, so it's kind of mushed up. It's a black flame.
a
Says this
torch.
lights my path,
Aha. I like
and
that.
I've got tattoos all over. I'm not going to take my clothes off, but yeah, just, yeah, I got
That's
simple
interesting.
blue, and then this is a triquetra, if you can see it at all.
Yeah.
Um, Mother Maiden Throne.
Yeah. I've never heard it called that before. I've heard it called a Triskelion, but I've never heard it called a triquetra. That's interesting.
That's the Celtic word for it, at least.
Okay.
Or the one I know, anyway. Whatever you call it, three parts.
Yeah.
Sometimes give us three leaves together, type thing. Not necessarily spirals or what have you, but yeah.
I've got a couple tattoos myself. I'd like to get some more, but it's interesting how a torch upside down is kind of like a broomstick. It's
True, right. And
yeah.
then I didn't notice until years later, but she actually wrote it upside down. So if I'm sitting like this, my arm has to be turned around.
Oh.
But it is what it is. That's what you get when you drink with your tattooist. But
Interesting. So yeah, I thank you very much for coming on and sharing your perspective and sharing your time with us. I've learned a lot personally. I'm sure a lot of our viewers will as well. I guess I'll let you get to dinner and the rest of your week. And I wish you well. Thanks again.
well, thanks for having me. And you have my actual personal number. So if you ever want to get in contact, I think
Sounds good.
I'm going